Sergio?
Yeah. Hey, Chris, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Thank you for contacting me. This is a great
Absolutely.
opportunity. Yeah, I love what you do. I love everything that is related to innovation, probably listening to how people involved in this think and probably what we can do, probably working
Fabulous.
together and learning from each other. So this is great. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. Well, let's get started. Why don't you introduce yourself and your organization and tell me what you're passionate about?
Sure. Let me start probably introducing myself. My name is Sergio Mastrogiovanni. I am a data scientist. I consider myself a consultant because I focus on finding or fixing global issues with AI, artificial intelligence, and digital tools or emerging technologies. My role is head of data and innovation at Nubiral. Nubiral is a company that probably born digital. It's a young company, but is growing very fast. We started this vertical from scratch, talking about AI and digital. And probably the last year, we have an explosion of demand, especially talking about COVID, because all the companies understood that they needed to make changes. Probably they realized something that we already knew, and probably COVID showed the world that probably there were verticals, there were processes ready for a change, for a reconversion, right? So my role is I lead the digital group. I lead a team of data scientists, and probably we help companies walking their digital journey and converting themselves. I also wear many hats like everyone. I am very involved with what is the data science community in New York, and the global open source community. I am a professor. I teach intelligent automation at NYU. That's where I worked in the past as a researcher, and I took my MBA there. I'm starting. I already did a PhD in my 40s.
Congratulations. Fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm working on connecting the dots with these many passions that I'm having. Mostly what is AI and technologies, probably what is business development, and the third one, my third hat, is sustainability. I'm very concerned. I'm very focused on fixing global issues with AI and technology. Probably those three hats are what I try to put together and working on. I was already doing it, but probably more seriously, and trying to have a bigger impact versus working with individual problems or individual companies fixing these challenges. So that's what I like the most. And probably my passion is about fixing issues with technology and helping people making sense out of their data. And of course, I am Latino and my family from Italy, so I love music, I love food, and I love soccer, of course. I love my team, San Lorenzo in Latin America and Barcelona. So I try to balance all the many hats that I'm wearing. So yeah, that's probably what I'm doing almost all, because I don't believe that we have a 9 to 5 work or life. I don't believe that we have a work-life balance anymore. We are the same person and we are interchanging hats at all time. So we need to probably be used to be 24/7 connected, right? We have a digital life and that is the new normal. So this is it.
No, exactly. I agree with you 100%. I mean, there's no such thing as like work. There's like, it used to be work and
Yeah,
life. Right now, it's all mixed up together. It's like
true.
there's no separation between the things anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Even if we go back to our offices, I don't think so, but let's imagine that you don't leave everything at 5 p.m. when you go back home, because you're switching tasks all day. We are posting on social media 24/7. We are reading social media 24/7. We are answering personal calls while we are in our office. We are working on our personal projects. Sometimes we are taking phone calls. So it's not a black or white. We have many colors in between. This is a rainbow, right? I would say 24/7, and we are creating more content than ever. We have more data than ever. This famous data deluge is something that we are creating content with every click, with every interaction. Even when we sleep, our phones keep creating content. So yeah, this is new life. We need to embrace it, embrace the chaos, embrace the mess, and deal with it, right?
Exactly. So I have a question for you. So
Sure.
I was thinking about how we all want AI to act more human. We're all trying to push for artificial general intelligence, AGI, right? But I think the way AI is going to reach sort of like those kind of levels is a completely different way in the way which human brains can reach those kind of levels. I think the thing about AI is that it can, and computers in general, they can take so much data and process so much data so much faster than human beings can. I think their intelligence is going to come from that sort of speed of processing and volume of processing. Is if they have enough data, they can come to the same conclusions that we can just by leveraging the data. Does that seem like that's the way it's going to be going?
Yeah, that's very true. That's why I like to focus. Anyways, we have more data than ever, and data is growing exponentially, while computational power or computer power grows linearly, right? There's something called Moore's law that was, I think, in the 70s with, I think this was an engineer from Intel. Anyways, you can see how actually that law, it talks about the capacity of the silicon chip that is duplicated every 2 years. It's linear. If you see the capacity is in the last 20 years or 30 years, grew linearly, while that data grows exponentially. So we don't have capacity, even in the upcoming years. Probably, I don't know, we might have any other technology that grows or goes beyond the silicon, beyond this technology that we have these days. Anyways, data is exponential. So we need to have processes in place, talking about the business world, right? To capture data, to process that data, to clean that data, and to consume that data. We have today systems like GTP3, for example, that can take or can speak like we humans do. So we have technically the capacity to process that data as our brains would do. Actually, that's one of the topics that I'm working on, that is neural networks that are treating these models like brains, like neurons, so we can understand, or we can probably address biggest or more complex challenges than forecasting, right? Probably forecasting is the low-hanging fruit that you can predict using AI, something like the weather, how much you are going to sell in the long run or the short future. That is the low-hanging fruit. But using deep learning and neural networks, you can take this to the next level and take this to, or using more sophisticated models like natural language processing, for example, using natural language for address business challenges. For example, understanding papers, understanding CVs, for example. I can relate this to HR and the recruiting process that in the past would take between, I think that the number is between 8 and 10 weeks. A recruiter would take to scan all the many CVs and recommendation letters and all these many documents, and this can be shortened using natural language processing. So the short answer is these models are getting close to how we think. Anyways, we all need the human touch or the humanness, if you will, for the many processes that we do. That we do. For example, I don't know, we also learned the bad way in this pandemic that medicine and healthcare can be done differently. In the past, it would take between 1 or 2 weeks to schedule an appointment with your doctor. And I'm probably sharing data, right? I'm not making this up. I think that the stats said that it would take you between 1 hour and 2 hours to go to your visiting your doctor, and you would spend around 1 hour average waiting, filling forms for a 5-minute visit that it would take you a short visit to your doctor. If you think about that could be, and we learned this pandemic that we can do it that using mobile technology. You can even see a doctor through your phone, through Skype, through Zoom. So probably we have many low-hanging fruit. Before we reach the human brain or the capacity to think like a human, we have many probably things that we can tackle before that. So we don't want a computer to think like a human, but we would like first to optimize the way that we work these days, right? Probably that is the low-hanging fruit, right?
Yeah. And then actually, it's interesting you should mention resumes, because I think that the thing with talent acquisition is that we have a long way to go before it can become more optimized. Because right now, everyone is still in the same old, here's a job description, here's a CV, let's match these things up, let's bring this person in, let's interview them, let's go through the whole process, and then like 2 weeks later, we realize, oh my God, that was the wrong kind of hire. How can you apply AI and machine learning and all that good stuff to make this whole process better?
First, you need to be very careful, because you don't want to leave the good candidates out, right? So you don't want false negatives. What this does, and I always recommend, at least probably this stage, we do have the technology to read, and actually it's very cheap. The prices are very low compared to what they used to be. Talking about particularly about cloud services, about Amazon AWS, or about Google GCP, or Amazon or Microsoft Azure. You don't need to buy a license to do this with with a software, or hire a company for doing this, or create this for you. You can hire these services that are cloud services, that they have cognitive services that are very, very good at a very low cost. But to your question, these processes, I like to say that they need to be supervised, especially those particular profiles that you need to be very careful, and you need to that your human touch. Probably if the low-hanging fruit are probably the analyst, or the very low skilled roles that you can probably use NLP, or natural language processing, for simplifying this process in the order to help you understanding what every CV or letter can do. So I will separate this in 2 parts. The first one is what is automation, and the second is the cognitive part, that is understanding text, right? So the first one, you can automate everything that is taking when you have the new CVs that arrive. You don't need to open every email and download those CVs somewhere, right? You can automate that part and have all the CVs in one bucket, in one repository, in one Dropbox, if you will. And the second part is taking those many, there are positions that would you have hundreds, I don't know, thousands of CVs. So taking those CVs and analyze, comparing and trying to match the best talent with the job description, right? And that is the low-hanging fruit. And then probably find or having the finalist, 10 finalists out of 200 CVs. And leave that part, I would leave that part to a human, right? That is reading the finalist and probably relying on a bot for everything that is scheduling the interviews, but having a human interviewing the candidates, right? And you also want your potential employees or future colleagues or collaborators to start with a very good experience in the very first minute, right? That's why I like the human touch, right? The humanness with that experience. So that's what I think that is probably the low-hanging fruit that is not talking about the future. That's something that is already happening these days, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, but then again, you also see sort of pushback on things like what Amazon was doing. They were using AI to filter resumes based on historical data. But the problem is that the historical data was showing bias. So you have to start trying to program bias out. Is that difficult to do?
It is very difficult because again, there are methods for avoiding that. That is sometimes when you don't have enough data. For example, I mentioned GTP3 and I mentioned natural language processing. Those are the technologies that you would use, for example, for translating. For example, when sometimes you translate, I speak Spanish, I speak also some Portuguese and some Italian. Those languages has a gender in the, for example, if you say doctor, you have doctor, that is a male, and doctora, that is a woman. So when you translate from English to Spanish or other language, most of the time those technology would translate a doctor as a man. For example, when you translate nurse, would be translated as enfermera, that means a woman nurse. So those are biased, not because the algorithms and the models are chauvinist or those are because probably our data says that we have more male doctors than female doctors. We have more woman nurse than man, male nurses. So those algorithms would go and check the data, and probably we have, I don't know, sometimes 70-30, or we don't have a fair distribution of the population. That's why you need to use some methods for what is fairness and avoiding bias. That is a silly example, but sometimes we are looking for something more complex. Like you don't want to leave, I don't know, not talking not only about gender, talking about many other features that are probably related to the fairness and to the bias that we have these days, because in the past, probably that would be fair, but not these days. And we have, I don't know, probably centuries of data. We have everything, at least let's say decades, we're collecting data, and we have that data ready in the many systems that are around. So we need to be very careful and probably use this type of models to curate, if you will, the data before you ingest the data into the model, right? So those are probably some tools that we use these days to avoid that.
Would that be human curation or would that be automated curation?
Both. Sometimes we have methods that could be, for example, sampling, that can be done automatically. And there are other methods that are more, or can be humans, or can be probably automatically done with machine learning. For example, ingesting data, new data from other records with some other features, and that could make a data set probably more fair, not 50-50, but if you have, I don't know, 80-20, can be 60-40, if you will. That is something, some methods that we data scientists use probably to avoid that, especially these days, right? In the past, we probably use the data that we have to train the model with the world as is. But now we are trying to change those bias, especially to be fair with probably hiring people. Probably we would look for something more close to what we hired in the past. And there is a vicious cycle. You keep doing the same that you did in the past, and it won't be broken. You won't go. You won't leave that cycle ever if you keep doing the same. So that's why we need to do different things and think differently, right?
Absolutely. So one of the things, just to pivot a little bit on one of the things you mentioned in your note, you were talking about AI and sustainability. And I know a lot of people are very, very interested in how you can apply, or like what you can do about sustainability, and how do you apply AI to something like a sustainability? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a good point. My background, I didn't mention this, but my background is actually in continuous improvement. That was probably my first job. I'm a Six Sigma black belt, and I'm very focused on what is efficiency. I'm actually an efficiency and a productivity nerd, if you will.
I think you have to be nowadays. If you're not a productivity nerd, you're going to fall behind.
Yeah, that's true. I think that the inequalities that we have today in the world are a question of inefficiency, if you will, because as you know, we have 35%, if we talk about food, we have 35% of the food available to eat that is disposed, that is wasted. So we waste 30-something percent. There are countries that they waste 40%.
Oh yeah, it's an insane number. It's insane. Like, I read those
it's
things.
Insane.
Like, how is this possible? How is it possible?
It's possible. Yeah, I know. It's inefficiencies because they probably harvest more food that they are going to sell. Talking about the first part of the supply chain, the different steps in the supply chain waste food. The supermarkets or the retail or whoever sells the food waste the food. The food expires, there are supermarkets actually that throw away the food because it's not nice. Actually, there's a movement called ugly food, selling this ugly food that the supermarkets dispose because it's not nice, or it's not nice to show in a
We actually have a vegetable service that only delivers ugly food.
Yeah, that's because it's the same food that you would buy more expensive at the supermarket. Anyway,
I mean, you're probably going to chop it up anyway. So what's the point? What's the difference, right?
Food is disposed in the different steps of the supply chain. Even we consumers dispose or have our refrigerator with food that we won't eat, and we dispose that food. Sometimes before that food expires, or sometimes we leave that food in our refrigerator expiring and we don't eat it, and we dispose, we waste that food. So it's efficient, it's efficiency, Chris. So AI is very good at this. For example, we can use, not saying that we can, actually there are refrigerators that can send you SMS, or a smart refrigerator telling you when the food is going to expire. telling you when you will receive in your smartphone alert saying that in 2 days your yogurt is expiring, your milk is expiring, you have I don't know, vegetables that you put there 1 week ago and is expiring. So there are ways to avoid this wasting. And in between, there are many Uber models. I have a past also in what is startup ecosystems. Every day I will see a new company saying, okay, we are the Uber for this process. Every day. Uber is Uber.
Everything.
there are not many Ubers. Anyways, there are many companies that are addressing these challenges, and they would collect the food before it expires, and they would send this food to people that is having a hungry or there are different situations. So this can be that food can reach the people that goes to bed hungry, right? So clearly, it's a question of efficiency, right? There's something that is imbalance clearly, and technology could help with that. And we could name many other global challenges that can be, I'm not saying solved or fixed, but can be done differently in order to have less, for example, pollution, for example, water, for example, many things that we are not doing, or we could do it better, right? We are consuming 1.7 planet Earth because we don't have enough resources. So we could do it differently, and we should do it differently, because the people that is coming after us is going to suffer that inefficiencies, those inefficiencies that we are having these days, right?
Yeah, and if you think about the whole food supply chain, from the actual growing of the vegetables till it actually gets to the end, this is such a long, convoluted thing with all sorts of supply and demand.
Absolutely, yeah.
The end user has eats this amount of food or that amount of food, and then the producer has to create a certain amount of food. There's no matching. Like if there was more, it's almost like if there was more information exchange, so that the grower would know, okay, you only need to grow X amount of beans this year, not X 2X. So there's no wastage. Like, is it like an information problem, or I mean, is there? I know it's not simple.
Yeah, no, it's not simple, but there are many probably many features in between, especially talking about the people in the fields that are harvesting this, or sometimes they are more interested, food is a commodity. They are more interested in the prices, and sometimes we have the government in between. Probably there are many, it's a very complex, but again, talking about supply chain is one of the verticals that are ready for disruption since probably decades ago. We have the same supply chain talking about the US, since the 50s, the same highways, the same, everything is distributed via trucks, using trucks. We need more information there. We need more, and at the same point, we are also having many players, many middlemen in between the consumer and the producer. So that's probably things that are going to happen, that we are going to have something that is going to connect. It's already happening, by the way, supply and demand, right? Again, going back to Uber could connect supply and demand. Airbnb, same model, connect supply and demand, eliminating middlemen, eliminating all the different steps that we had in between, making it even more complex. So data is going to help a lot. It's going to help also producers avoid wasting food, because they are interested also in the price. They sometimes probably harvest more because the price is high, and when the price is lower, they don't have they don't have enough, or so there are many factors that are going to help us creating or using what we need, and also helping the producer producing what they are going to sell, and not more or less. So yes, there's something that we already have, those probably let's say artifacts to make it simpler, but it's going to take time, right? It's not going to, changes don't happen overnight. But anyways, we are ready for that change. And I would say that we need it, because we are having many things happening around and converging. This is what we call industries 4.0, that represent these many technologies enabling many technologies, many more showing up and probably happening this. If we talk about blockchain, for example, blockchain is already disrupting the supply chains, but it's very expensive. We cannot apply blockchain for all the processes that we know. So yes, it's going to help data and having these artifacts and platforms and everything that are appearing these days, right?
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit, I mean, it seems like a huge problem, but automation, okay? I love automation. I love to automate almost everything I do. I mean, one of the best things that came out for me in the Alexa was the routines, right? Where you could say, oh, here's the, say one thing and it strings a bunch of things together, right? And you're talking in your note here about intelligent automation. I mean, I would love my automation to be intelligent. It's not really smart right now. I mean, it should be able to detect when I come into my office and then just automatically do everything I need to do to set everything up. So, I mean, how far away are we from true intelligent automation? And what would you say is intelligent automation?
Intelligent automation is the intersection between what is RPA. RPA is, for those that don't know, robotic process automation. That is basically the low-hanging fruit. It's used for everything that is repetitive and high volume of transactions. For example, I don't know, you need to download or collect data from different sources, and the work is very repetitive. The best metaphor for this is ATMs. ATMs in the 80s, we would have a guy typing on a computer and receiving people and counting money and giving the money to the consumer. So many points of failures, many issues, and a very repetitive task. These guys would do the same every day. So RPA is the low-hanging fruit, and we also have cognitive automation. Cognitive automation is everything that we said before: reading text, understanding text, computer vision, bots, if you will, what is text-to-speech. Alexa is a very good example of cognitive automation. And intelligent automation is something in between, take both. For example, ATM is a good example, because you will have everything that guy, that human teller would do in the 80s, that is engaging with the customer, greeting the customer. That, if you think about that, even though we need the human touch, I don't know how much value that would add to the business, right? So everything automated in a model that is the ATM. Interestingly, the banks that didn't replace or automated or leave people behind, because those tellers kept their work, their jobs or their role, and banks had their operation cheaper or a lower cost. So they could open more branches around. You have Chase today, a Chase branch every 2 blocks in New York, for example. In the past, you would have 1 branch per town, and that branch would have 20 human tellers until a couple of years. Now we have another situation. I don't recall when was the last time I went to my bank, because we work online and we don't go to our branches. But anyways, ATM didn't replace or didn't leave people behind, or didn't took the human teller job. that is actually a good metaphor of what is intelligent automation. Intelligent automation is what we have in between RPA and cognitive automation. Again, RPA for the repetitive transaction and cognitive for the interaction or engagement with the customer, right?
So how does okay, a couple of things there. So it's interesting you mentioned that RPA sort of has taken away these jobs, but then, I agree with you. I think that, people keep saying that people are losing jobs to automation, but I think that's a good thing, because if your job can be automated, that means you as a human being, the job is below you. I mean, human beings are much more creative and intelligent than that specific role, so they can easily do something else. So that's perfectly good. And then, but on the other hand, it's like, what these devices already know so much about us. Is there any reason why they can't be more proactive? Is there a reason why we can't make these things more proactive, and so that they like intelligently can go ahead and do things on our behalf without us having to ask them to?
Yes. First, I think that to your first point, I think that the consumer evolved. We the people evolved. We are not the same consumer that we used to be in the past. I used to start my talks with a picture. If you walk New York, not talking about 2020, talking about 2019, you will see every block, you will see an empty space, empty store that is store for sale, store for rent.
Yeah.
Because we consumers, we don't want to waste our time. We want to order everything via Amazon even before the pandemic times.
Yeah.
So we evolve, we expect something, we expect a good service, we expect something, what we need at our doors in minutes if possible. We don't want to go to the doctor, spend 1 hour commuting, or go to a supermarket and wait in lines.
Oh, especially in New York City. Didn't you used to have Cosmo there, where like a 2-hour delivery service or something like that?
Yeah, true. Anyways, to your point, first the consumer, we the consumers evolve. We are expecting a better experience than these guys can give to us. Those that didn't understand that are going out of business, sadly, because it's not a funny or a thing, but they need to make changes, right? Second, about your second point, having proactively our needs. That is Amazon, for example, is a good example. When you are going out of stock, they probably order something on your behalf. Or talking about something that is, we touched healthcare before. The US has probably the most expensive healthcare system in the world. We are talking about $3 trillion. So we have today the technology for everything that you mentioned. For example, believe it or not, we have toilets that can collect your data, let's call it in this way. So proactively can tell you when you need to go see your doctor, or you have intelligent mirrors using computer vision that can probably read your eyes or read something when you are not good. And even when you drink, or even you can take samples of your blood, if you will, or your saliva, in order to see or to tell you when you need to go for a check or do something like that. So in other words, we have the technology for being proactive about many processes, not just buying goods or ordering food. For example, healthcare, for example, your own health. You don't need to go to your doctor, or you need, but you can do it proactively, collect your own. We all wear, I don't know, Apple Watch or watches or phones that you can probably use your thumb, and that can collect many things about your healthcare, and you can even biohack your own health to be proactive and collecting data and understand what is good for you, what is not. When you eat something, you can measure your blood pressure, you can measure what is good for you, what is not. Those intelligent toilet, if you will, that I mentioned before, can tell you something that you have done that is not good for you. And again, we are not talking about individual devices. We are talking about the network devices interconnected. So those toilets and those mirrors would be connected with via IoT and sensors with your refrigerator, and they would know what you have in your refrigerator, what you have eaten, and what you have done. When
and
you
it's
walk
like it can
enough,
detect if you need to change your diet, and it can actually
absolutely
order food for you, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a very interesting if you look at the bright side. Again, sometimes it's creepy, if you will. But anyways, it's a very interesting. I try to be very naive and optimistic.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I think it's as soon as people start getting something positive out of it, they say, well, it's not creepy anymore. Like, for example, I remember at one point they were going through cell phone bills to recommend people better rates, right? At one point. And people were like, oh my God, you're reading through all my cell phone bills. I don't want to do that. And then nowadays it's like, oh, please read through my emails and cell phones. And if you could recommend me a better rate, please do it for me. I don't want to do it for. Do you think that the people are leaning more towards AI and automation doing stuff for them? Or do you think people are going in the opposite direction?
It's a very good point, Chris. I'm very engaged with some conversations that are global conversation about data privacy and these many things that are very concerning because actually there are laws regulating this or starting regulating this. To be very honest with you, I'm more concerned about, especially when we talk about COVID-19 and these very apps that are tracing our moves, where we go, and probably spotting when we have a focus of infections or things like that. I wouldn't say that is concerning for me. I'm more concerned about just the opposite, about these many systems banning people or banning press or journalists and not allowing them to say what they need to say, rather than having probably tools tracing us, especially if we are talking about for something for the greater good. I'm not happy at all of having my information being shared with many companies, but anyways, all this, you need to balance trade-off of this. I don't like any extreme, right? Or having a system banning or system being banned, like happened with TikTok or with many countries or many other platforms, or these social media banning people. Again, we have extremes, of course, right? But anyways, I think that we need to have regulations and probably people who is regulating this, I'm not sure they get what it takes to regulate these many systems and personal data. So interesting challenge. Open discussion, yeah.
Yeah, governments they're really behind on these things, so they're not like near the cutting edge of the technology. The technology is so far ahead now. I mean, Facebook and Google and all Amazon know so much more about us.
Yeah.
We almost even know about ourselves because they can recommend things that we have no idea there was something that we wanted, but it's like, wow, that's exactly what I was looking for at the right moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, they don't even, they can recommend things that we don't even know we need.
Exactly.
So that's something that is interesting and weird and creepy sometimes, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I wanted to talk about here was you're talking about bridging social gaps with technology. What would you say that is?
If you ask me, I'm very concerned about people being left behind, probably talking about the future of work, talking about these things or technologies growing exponentially and people are not at the same or following the same pace, and at the same time many verticals that needs changes. For example, you go to college 5 years, and probably when you finish your college or your degree, you get your degree, the world is different. So you are trained for something that you are not going to need, or
Totally, especially
when you have the answer, the question changed.
Oh yeah, it's completely different. But it's like things go so quickly. It's almost like you need some alternative to that kind of education. And I know there's data science boot camps and stuff like that. I mean, there are people who coming out of those things. Are they skilled enough to actually be able to do work in data science?
Yeah, they are very good. Again, I think that data science for studying or doing data science, you need to have 3 pillars that are first math and stats. That is, it's not just coding, it's not just Python. You need to have Python is probably the second pillar. So it's computer science first. You need to know how to code, or you need to know these tools. You need to know math and stats. That is the second pillar. And the third is probably having the business hat, understanding what the question is, because it's not just coding and creating models for the technology's sake. So if you cannot balance those 3 things, I don't think that is enough going to a boot camp, because you are going to learn how to code with Python and that's it. You are not going to learn stats, and you are not going to learn how the question or what the big picture is. So you need to understand what is happening out there before coding, because if not, you are being focused on something small. You are seeing a very small portion of the picture. You need to have the whole picture. So that's why I think that I'm not saying that someone needs to go to college and spend 5 years until they become a data scientist, but they need to have the 3 pillars, at least some kind of them. Probably be good at something. You cannot be very good at everything. You need to probably choose or pick your battles. But yes, if you don't know the business question, if you don't know what the question is, it's not enough. So I like people that goes to that. I actually ask people that work with me, or that go to those boot camps, when they already have everything that they need. So I like those boot camps, but it's not enough. You know, you need to have the other 3 or the other 2 pillars.
Right. Okay, so it's foresight leadership time. So let's look at the year 2031. It's 10 years from now. What will the world be like?
My role?
No, what will your role, what will your company, what will the world be like in 10 years? What are we going to see?
It's a very good question. I see a trend probably with many changes happening together. And I don't think that everything is going to change overnight, like many people think that robots are going to take
Unless we have another crisis like COVID, then it'll change overnight.
I think that we are going to be a very people is going to be have a very interesting data literacy. We are probably the last generation, talking about you and me, we are a hybrid generation. We have born with analog devices, television, you name it, many DVDs, many devices that we are not going to have in the future. We are going to be a very digital generation. Everything is going to be digital. Everything is going to, again, I'm saying, what I'm saying is based on data that I saw and many different, analysis being done by the McKinseys and the many probably consulting companies. I think that probably the pace is going to be more hectic and more crazy than ever. We are going to be used to what is the many challenges that we don't even know. So probably if talking about going back to college, we won't have 5 years college like we do today. Probably college is going to be 2 or 3 years. People are going to be keep going to college, and probably education is going to change. It's already changing, right? Healthcare is going to change, as we mentioned. We are going digital. We are not going to see doctors anymore. I think some professions that are going to, are going to keep, for example, nurses. We are going to, you need a very human touch for a nurse role. And I think that we are probably going to have AI doctors before before nurse doctors. We are going to have AI doctors in our phones, because we, as we mentioned, we are already capable of collect our measures, if you will, before going to see a lab. Talking about probably AI and the cities, I see smart cities already happening, because in the past you see automation and human teller versus a machine teller or an ATM. I don't know, probably a writer with a printer, if you will. But now you are not comparing a cab driver versus a autonomous vehicle or a self-driving car. You are going to have a fleet of cars intelligently connected. So you are not going to have a cab driver replaced by a car. You are going to have an intelligent fleet driving us wherever we want to go, reducing the accidents, because 90% of the accidents happen for very human errors, right? Like drinking, texting, distractions, you name it, right?
Driving would be so much better if there were no more humans doing it.
Yeah, after all, what we want to keep is the humanity and the benefit for, the quality of life, more than jobs. We don't want to protect jobs. We want to protect humans. So I see a very digital, organized society for good. I'm very optimistic again. And it's something very predictive, with devices telling us what we need to do before we even realize, right?
So here's a question for you. I mean,
Sure.
I heard the hypothesis the other day that life is getting so complicated that at a certain point, there's going to be people who are not going to be able to sort of work because it's going to be too complicated. So they're going to have to go on UBI. Do you see that theory have any legs?
Makes sense. I didn't think about that, but makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It is complicated. It is something that in the past we used to do, it was very simple. We used to have a very linear life. People would go to probably start with the very first job at 18, and probably they would retire from that job, and they would a very similar routine every day. They would have this similar routine every day, leave their office at 5 p.m., go home, watch television, same show, having dinner at the same time. If you think about that, that was more like a robot than the life
Not
that
anymore.
we have today. Yeah. So I think that is going to be unpredictable life every day, because we are going to have more pandemics, we are going to have more diseases, if you will. We are going to have, we don't have a linear life anymore. For good and for bad, you choose what.
I love that. I love that statement. We're not having a linear life anymore. I love that. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been great.
My pleasure.
If somebody can get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Sure. Probably find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm very active in Twitter. As I mentioned, as you see, I love formal education. I love reading books, but I find I found Twitter as the best tool for keeping myself up to date, and I recommend everyone. So I'm very active in Twitter, LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put your bio and contact information in the show notes if anyone
Awesome.
gets in touch with you. So thanks so much. It's been great talking with you. Have a good day.
Keep rocking. You too. Bye-bye.